if Tim Drake is okay, I think this might be an appropriate thing I can talk about. Actually, as its own video, I can edit this. Honestly, Attack of the Menace. Who really gives a shit if Tim Drake is bisexual? Who gives a shit? I think all these anti-SJWs that are bitching about it, they're just a bunch of fucking idiots that complain about everything and anything. God forbid bisexual people exist. God forbid gay people exist. It's just the same fucking nonsense that we've been seeing from these fucking clowns for the past few years now. It's like, seriously, who gives a shit if fucking Tim Drake is bisexual? So fucking what? So fucking what? And someone's gonna go and tell me, oh, who cares what some person who hasn't read that many comics thinks? You know what? I don't fucking care. It's fucking fiction, for God's sake. There's nothing that indicates in the text that Tim Drake cannot be bisexual. Who fucking gives a shit? It's comic books, for crying out loud. Things change all the goddamn time. At the time that these comic books were made, all it was straight white people. So if they're going to make some of these characters, bisexual, who fucking gives a shit? Bisexual people exist and always have exist. So have gay people. There's no fucking gay agenda. It's just the same stupid nonsense that these corporations have always done. They're trying to give the image to everybody else that they're progressive, even though they're not. Anyone that's complaining about, oh my God, the SJWs are taking over everything. No. This is just first world nonsense that anti-SJWs use as a pillar to look for something else to attack. Honestly, if a gay person exists in a piece of media, they'll attack, that in the cover of, oh my God, I don't hate gay people. I just want good stories. When in actuality, no, they do hate gay people and they hate bi people. They just use stories as a cover up to attack this. Oh, I don't hate women. I want good stories, even though they clearly hate women. Oh, I don't hate people of color. I just care about good stories. Bullshit. It's the same goddamn nonsense. Like, oh, I'm not racist, but it's the same goddamn nonsense. I've seen it all before. And what does this have to do with what I'm talking about here? Every single time a character is announced to be bisexual or gay, they fucking lose their shit over fucking the stupidest shit. It's like, seriously, who cares if fucking Tim Drake is bisexual? Who cares if he had a boyfriend? And who cares if he turns out actually no, he's not. He's actually gay. Who gives a shit? Why? Who gives a shit? Of all the things to be concerned with, the planet is fucking burning. This is one of the hottest summers on record, and these idiots are more concerned with, how fucking things go in a comic book. This reeks of first world privilege. This is why I'm saying that anybody that complains about this shit endlessly, they're fucking middle class. They don't care about fucking workers. They don't care about, things that are going on in the world that's heavily affecting workers. They just fucking want to use their bigotry as an excuse to attack a certain group of people and use, comic books or cartoons or whatever to cover their own homophobia and their own racism. It's the same goddamn thing. Nobody's going to convince me that a lot of these people are not sexist or racist or homophobic every time a new character or an existing character comes off as being something that they weren't before. Nothing's going to convince me that is the case. If they truly cared about stories, why are they so fixated on the character's sexuality? Why are they so fixated on the character's gender? Why? Because they're insecure. They're a bunch of privileged fucking white men or middle class people that fucking, have no idea what actual life struggles are like. So they inject their bullshit onto the stuff that they claim to enjoy. It's like it's fucking entitlement. That's all that it is. That's all this fucking shit is. These fucking nerds, they think, they're like fighting the good fight. They're fucking saving culture. It's like, what? It's a fucking comic book. Who gives a shit? Who fucking cares? I don't care if Tim Drake is gay. I don't even care if they make a character black. Why? Because it doesn't matter. Batman is a fascist propaganda comic that does nothing but justify the beating of mentally disabled people and doesn't offer any solutions to the problem that capitalism creates. So I don't care if they make Batman black because it doesn't matter. Batman would still be a fascist if Batman was black than if Batman was white or Batman was Asian or whatever, because the ideology of Batman and an extension Robin is the same hypocritical moralistic bullshit. Oh, we'll beat a criminal and we'll beat him up to Pope, lock him in Arkham Asylum and throw away the key, but we're not going to actually solve the problems that our class creates in the first place. It's like, that's exactly essentially what it was. And for those of you who complain about me constantly about bringing up politics when I talk about this stuff, well, tough shit, because these comics are political. They clearly are. They clearly have an agenda, and the agenda is, there's no point of trying to fight the system because you're just as bad as the people that uphold the system. It's the same cowardly liberal bullshit that fucking has been injected in our fucking art in the past 40 fucking years now. That's what it fucking is, all right? And you know what? I don't care, honestly. And you know what? Can you enjoy Batman despite the problematic stuff? Of course you can. I'm not saying that, but I'm speaking it from an objective, analysis. So as somebody that looks at things from a Marxist lens, that's exactly what it is. I'm not going to say you cannot enjoy anything that has problematic themes in them, because let's be honest here. If we limited to only enjoying things that align with our political views, guess what? We're not going to be able to enjoy anything, because everything is fucking made with a capitalist mindset in mind. So we have to exist with the system, and if we're going to be entertained, for a few hours or whatever, we have to acknowledge this. But that's not what I'm talking about here. That I'll probably talk about that subject another day. But the Damien thing it's just I don't care, honestly. I mean, these anti-SJWs, they've been complaining about the smallest shit for years, about how evil SJWs are, yet they can't see the irony how what they're pushing, their agenda is, oh, let's remove anything that's even remotely left-wing out of these stories. Well, there's really nothing really left-wing about anything that DC does, especially considering DC has always been, 10 or 20 years behind Marvel when it comes to progressive issues. When it comes to characters that are LGBTQ, Marvel's had LGBTQ characters a lot longer than DC has, openly. So, yeah, I don't want to fucking hear it. Oh, I just want to escape the harsh realities of the world. It's like, guess, you know what? That's a privileged position. Anyone that says comic books are escapism are fucking privileged and have never actually, grown up poor. Comic books originally were working class. Marvel and DC were originally for people that were working class, not a bunch of middle class fucking individuals that like to complain on the internet all day about how SJW comics are ruining the industry, despite the fact there's more comics than ever before. These fucking people. It's like, you know why Marvel and DC comics have been going to shit in the past, almost 30 years now? Because they've been losing their working class character. And I'm not speaking from DC. I'm more speaking to Marvel. Spider-Man. Remember how Spider-Man, at least the Spider-Man I grew up with, was working class, was actually somebody that a lot of us can relate to, minus the superhero powers. Struggling to pay rent, struggling to make ends meet, struggling to maintain relationship. All this, plus being a superhero. Spider-Man wasn't rich. He wasn't middle class. And those earlier stories. But as time moved on, as the culture changed, Spider-Man became more middle class. And that's why the stories just don't resonate as much with people these days. And people don't want to acknowledge that middle class people are not really our friends. I'm referring to the poor, actually. They're not our friends. They're not. They never have been our friends. We don't exist. And I'm just using Disney, Star Wars, not Disney, Star Wars, Marvel as an example. Look how poor people are portrayed in movies compared to the middle class. They're usually portrayed as criminals, people that are dumb, people that are incapable of doing anything besides crime. It's like, look at Spider-Man. Look at Spider-Man in the MCU versus his earlier incarnations on screen. He's middle class. All the people that Spider-Man goes after are victims of people that were fucked over by Tony Stark. And that's pretty much what it is. And if you compare it to the other movies, like the Sam Raimi films, where actually you can make an argument that Spider-Man in those films is a working class hero, because look at the kind of apartment he lives in. It's fucking shitty. He could barely make ends meet in that damn apartment. And not to mention, the kind of criminals he stops are the criminals that actually harm people, that are poor. Spider-Man is a champion of the working class in those films. You started seeing less of that with Andrew Garfield's movies, but again, which was ridiculous. But this is the reason why Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is considered the best version of the character on screen, because he is the most relatable, honestly, to a lot of us. Because Spider-Man is the working class superhero. And why am I talking about Spider-Man? Because Spider-Man is the superhero that I grew to love as a kid. Because I related to the character because of all the stuff that he went through. And as an adult, I relate to the older version of Spider-Man, the older stories, the ones from the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s. That is the Spider-Man I relate to. Not the modern version of Spider-Man who's a man-child, who's entitled, who has the middle class mentality. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because middle class people do not understand working class, people at all. And I know some people are going, but aren't middle class people working class? Not really. Not in the same sense, because working class people are one paycheck away from being homeless. The middle class don't understand what that is like. So the stories that they grew to love, they don't understand that they were pro-working class. A lot of these stories were. Now, I'm not going to talk about fucking fascists like Iron Man, who's never been a friend of the working class, or other superheroes I'm not as familiar with. The X-Men were the same way. The X-Men were an allegory for whatever minority that, is oppressed around the world. It's like the X-Men have stood the test of time purely because of that. Like, if you read the X-Men, today, even though the stories are not as much, don't have the working class character that they once did, even X-Men is still more true to its roots than Spider-Man is these days. I'm not as familiar with Superman, actually, so I can't talk about Superman. I will take your word for it. Yeah. Okay. Back to what I was saying, honestly. That's the reason why you're seeing comic books, slowly, at least the Marvel and DC, slowly, getting worse with time. Because, when you have something that was originally made, with the working class in mind, and had the working class character, and you have people that didn't grow up working class, that actually don't have the experience of being working class, that don't have the experience of being extremely poor, or growing up in extreme poverty, it's going to look different compared to what it was before. That is something we don't hear these people talk about. It's always the meaningless shit that doesn't matter. Like, there's women in a comic book, or there's a black guy, or there's a gay man, or there's a transgender character. It's never about the things that I talk about, because comic books in general, were marginalized when they were being published. And a lot of the people that actually read them were working class people. It wasn't fucking middle class people that read those comics. It wasn't freaking, the upper middle class or the rich that read these comics. It was the fucking poor that read these comics. It was the working class that read these comics. It just when over time, when some of these people who read these comics as kids went to went up to the middle class, that they probably they introduced this to their kids, and their kids were brought up in middle class. So their kids who would eventually do these comics that a lot of us hate now, grew up not with working class culture, but with middle class culture. Entitlement, looking down on poor people, thinking that people that take any form of government assistance or use whatever means they need to survive are leeching off the middle class. It's like, it all makes sense when you actually study, the history, of comic books and how it relates to the working class. It makes sense when you look at it that way. When you take something that was a hobby that was originally for working class people, and you have people that aren't working class that actually work on these comics, the comics lose what made them great in the first place. And honestly, that's just how I feel about it.